Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Show Me How It's Done. I'm your host, Laura Nerbonis, and I'm a Canadian demonstrator, so if you have any questions or if you need any products, please don't hesitate to reach out. I am going to put all the measurements for this card in the description on the video, so you're welcome to just watch along with me, or if you'd like, you can just click pause and cut all your pieces in advance so that you're ready to craft as well. So, welcome! We are right in the middle of one of my favorite times of year, and this is called Celebration. So for every $60 you spend up here in Canada, those numbers will be different if you're in the States or Europe or somewhere else, but just check with your demonstrator on that. So in Canada, for every $60 you spend, there are items in this little brochure that you can receive for free. There are also items you can get for $120 in purchase. So today on our project, I wanted to show you how to make this adorable little hippo card. My husband and I just recently went to Hawaii for the first time, and when I was designing this, wanted to kind of share the little tropical ocean feel. So that's where the inspiration for this card is coming from today. So the three things that we're using from our brochure are the Hippest Hippos Stamp Set. You're also using the Hippo Dies, and the catalog gives you some great ideas to use. But if you're somebody who's like, nah, I don't really love hippos, I've seen a lot of people just add spots to these guys and turn them into cows, so they look really cute that way too. And then the last thing that I'm choosing to use is this amazing phrases stamp set. This is one of our $120 items, but as you can see, it is packed full of sentiments, so it's well worth the treat. And maybe something to consider putting on your little wish list if you've got one going. So let's begin. We're going to start with a little card base of Granny Apple Green. So I decided to cut this by 4 1/4 by 11, and then I've put a score mark at 5 1/2 so that my card folds in half like this. It just opens straight up like so. Now on the inside, I always like to have something to write on, so I'm just cutting a piece of basic white. This is going to be 4 inches by 5 1/4. And that will just go straight onto the inside of my card, and might as well just add that right now. Let's do it. So I love my double-sided tape. If you're somebody who prefers seal or glue, that is just fine as well. But use whatever flat adhesive you have to attach this to the inside of your card. I thought this would be a cute little piece that you could come back and stamp on later, but you don't really need anything at the moment. Maybe you'll come back and add a sentiment from that set too. Okay, now on the outside, we want a piece of basic black. That is going to be 4 by 5 1/4 as well, but I'm popping this piece up on dimensionals because I want it to kind of come off my page just a little bit. So make sure you've got that nicely set out for yourself. Maybe throw a couple of these in the middle, and then we can attach this to the front of the card. These are very easy measurements. The technique rests more in the background here that I'd like to show you today. So put that on the front of your card, and then you can set this aside because we're not going to use it at the moment. We're going to focus on this background. So for the background, I suggest cutting a piece larger than what you're going to need, just in case you have to hold something with your thumb or you make a little mistake with your stamping. It's much easier to cut this down after the fact. So what I did is I just cut this 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. As long as it's bigger than what we're going to cut it down to, you're fine. So it could be a large piece that we're working with right now, but for now I just took one piece of regular cardstock and chopped it into 4. Okay. So for our technique, you will want some sort of scrap paper. I'm just using one of the backings from our designer papers, but go ahead and use grid paper or anything else you'd like. So our Tropical Hideaway stamp, this is what we're using. It is a massive background stamp. So what we have are two options to use it. You can either use a clear block, or, because that's kind of heavy, this one gets a little heavy, or what you can do is, if you own the Stamparatus, you can also use this tool, because then if you're using it for multiple cards, you can just keep your stamp mounted and do the same thing every time. So let me show you how to set that up. We would just open one of our flaps, and these do come with two plates. I just store it only with one. So I'm going to lift my background stamp off the case. It's nice and sticky. Now I'm going to imagine I'm putting my paper down kind of right in this area. So this is where I'll be putting my stamp, rubber side down. To pick it up, I just close that lid, and then my stamp is now permanently mounted until I take it off onto this plate. Okay, so a couple things to note when you're actually adding ink. We're going to want a stamp case behind our plexiglass, because this will make the width, or I guess the height of your plate kind of parallel to the table, instead of bending backwards and putting a lot of force on here when you're kind of rubbing ink onto it. So I do suggest, for the life of your little Stamparatus handles, put a case under it. It can be any case. And then we're going to put our paper down into that empty space. Now you'll notice that your stamp here is much larger than the paper that you're using, and that's okay. We're just kind of covering as much of it as we can. We're going to do some embossing. So I'm using my sticky Versamark ink, and I'm going to just make sure I get all the red rubber nice and inked up. It's very hard to see, so you just kind of have to go counterclockwise or clockwise. Just make sure you've got it all. Okay, now flip this over and just start rubbing all the parts of your stamp, because with a large background stamp, you do want to make sure that every single part of it is touching the paper. There's not a high or a low part. And then when you think you're happy, go ahead and lift this up. You won't be able to see this right now until I start on my embossing powder. So this is one of our new embossing trays. You can find it in the holiday catalog. And it comes with a tray with this nice pouring spout. And I will show you the other things in a sec, because I don't want this to dry. So I'm just going to take black embossing powder and go over the top. And then I'm going to tip her up and let gravity do its work as you've gone down the page. Okay, now if you've missed a spot, go ahead and add any embossing powder. And then you'll notice, like, my fingers have definitely touched a couple places, and that's why we've cut this larger than we've needed to. Okay, so another piece of this toolkit, it's a 4-part toolkit. There's a little set of pliers. So the trick to these guys is to just squeeze this middle part and they will open. Okay, so now we can hold onto our paper like so and not burn our little fingers under the heat tool. You also have a little brush, so if you're doing a sentiment or some fine detail work, you can go ahead and brush off any extra little powders you see. There's also an embossing buddy, which if you watched my Show Me How It's Done video last week, I showed you a really key feature of why you need this if you're doing both embossing and stamping at the same time. So I didn't use it today because for my large background, I'm not as concerned about any extra little powders. But watch my video from last week because you will see why it's a really important tool. Okay, I'm gonna put this, there we go, to the side. And then we're going to heat emboss this. So I'm just gonna start. And what you'll notice is my paper and powder is gonna go from kind of this matte, boring look to a nice shiny look. Black is one of the hardest ones to tell when it's done because it barely changes. It's kind of something you have to hold up to the light and tilt all over. But if you're working with gold or silver, those are going to be your best friends if you're first learning how to emboss. So start with one of those two, because you can see the silver goes from a really boring gray to a really vibrant silver, and gold is of course brown to gold. So really nice to work with, hard for you to see on this video. So let's do it. Okay, I'm just going to pause there. I have done most of this now, and hopefully you can see it's kind of nice and shiny in this part, but in my bottom corner it's still very dull on this big leaf and the small one here. So that's what I have to finish. I know black is just really hard to see, but a little bit of shine here, not shiny here. Okay, so there we go. We are done. You can open your little tweezers and move. So now this is the half that this little section is the one I'm gonna trim off. So bearing that in mind, that's the side. I'm gonna just put down to my mat with a little piece of tape, because we're gonna do a little bit of ink work, okay? So to get the fun little colored background that you see here, I'm using some blending brushes. I have 2 of them on hand, one for my blue, one for my green. And I really do encourage you to keep those colors separate. It's really hard to kind of mix and match. Otherwise you get ink in a different ink pad, and that's just, it's not a nice thing to work with. So when you're working, they come in a set of 3. Use the 3. I personally have bought 6 of them, because even though they do rinse out just under cold water, you'll still end up with a little bit of staining sometimes. So now this brush, for instance, I will use with any blue shade that I'm going to use, the techniques. This will be any green. I have one for yellows, orange, red, and purple. And then that way I'm not mixing color palettes, even though I am using them with multiple ink pads. Okay, so ink colors that I've chosen, you can use anything you want, but I've got Granny Apple Green and Tahitian Tide. And you're going to want to start with the lighter of whatever colors you have. In this case, they're pretty even, but I would say the green is probably going to be my lighter. If you're doing a sunset look, you would of course start with a yellow. So just lift those straight up, kind of like a makeup compact, and sometimes they'll wiggle into place. There we go. All right, with green brush, we are going to start by just kind of going in gentle circles on our ink pad. That's going to pick up a lot of color for us. And then same thing, just going to tap off on the side in case there's a blotch of color or anything, and gently roll that color on. So you're going to want some parts that are really heavy in green and some parts that are kind of tapered out. Then pick a different spot, add some color, keeping in mind you can always come back and fill in any whites, but can't really take anything away. So There we go. I think I'm happy with that for now. And then I'm going to bring my blue in. So that's Tahitian Tide. Close this up. Once again, just lifting straight up like a makeup. I use this one a ton, so I'm going to have to soak it up. So nice circles to grab that ink. And then I'm going to go into the white areas, but I'm also going to gently touch in some of the green so that it gives me the look of 3 colors instead of 2. Okay, so I've started off kind of really gently going into that space, and I now have kind of a turquoise look, the blue, and the green, which is really nice to work with as we go. Okay, grab yourself some more ink. And just continue filling in all your white space. I wasn't kidding, I do have to re-ink this. There we go. These brushes are so nice to work with. They go on so easily. There we go. So then when you're happy, you can put this brush aside and close up your ink. I'm going to use this as a little teachable moment because I do have to re-ink this ink pad. And I haven't shown you guys in a long time how to do that. So let me grab my re-inker. This is, make sure it's the same one, Tahitian Tide. So some people do this by just adding dots all over their pad, like this. If you're kind of just doing the basics, I have used so much of my ink that I'm actually just going to come and do squiggles all over the pad. You can see it's starting to soak in, and I'm even going to go this way because I know I have used every single bit of color from this. Okay, so that should be good enough for now. I'm going to take my bone folder. You can see it's already well colored, and I'm just gently going to start moving that color from side to side, go around the ink pad, making sure to kind of push it in on all parts of the pad. Okay. So once you're happy, once you think you've kind of touched everywhere, just grab a Kleenex or something and wipe off your bone folder. It will stain over time, but that's okay. And then this ink pad you're going to want to keep in this position. Usually we kind of close them and go this way. That ink needs to rest. So keep it upside down just for about 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to set it to the side. And then back to this guy here. To get off any excess ink that's resting on your embossing, just take a Kleenex and rub over top. It won't take the color from your paper, but it will grab it from any of the embossing pieces that you have going on. Okay, so now that we have nicely done all of this, we're going to trim our paper down to size, and you can use whatever sort of trimmer you've got on hand. Here's my Stampin' Up! One. So I need to line the top up to 3 3/4 and cut. Should give me just a tiny little strip. And then my bottom is going to 5. Okay. So in the end, this piece should be 3 3/4 by 5. Then you do have a couple little scraps that you could always add to the inside of your card just for a decorative strip if you wanted to. Okay. So to attach this to our card, I'm putting this one on with flat adhesive. So I'm going to grab my tape, put some of that on the back, and get this mounted on that black front. Go. Make sure your card is opening the right way, and then you can put this on. There we go. Okay, now to decorate. This is where our little hippo friend comes in. So let me show you the pieces that I used for that. So I first stamped myself a little hippo, this guy right here, with smoky slate ink on top of a smoky slate cardstock. Then I used the die sets and I cut out some little goggles in Parakeet Party. I cut out this little life preserver right here in Poppy Parade, and a little snorkel here in Tahitian Tide, like so. And then for this wave, you can see it's not as big of a chunk as I did. So I cut myself a piece of Tahitian Tide. It was about 3 inches by 1 3/4. And then I just used this die on the top to cut those waves into the image. Okay, so I wanted lots of space for a sentiment down below. And of course you could have used something from this set, but I like the really bold, really vibrant sentiment. So we're gonna use that. Okay, so there's my waves. I'm gonna start with stamping on there, and I'm using, woohoo! So I need my little Tahitian Tide ink. Just gently, because remember we have just re-inked this, so super gently get that ink on there. Continue letting it set for a minute. And then stamp and hold. Find when you're stamping on colored cardstock, you need to let it soak in for a minute here. There we go. Now to assemble our little pieces. Okay, so this guy I'm going to pop up on dimensionals, but I'm only putting dimensionals on the sides because I want my hippo to be able to slip in the middle. Okay, so you'll see why that's so much easier if you just do this. Put your dimensionals on the 2 sides, leave the space in the middle open. Putting that guy right there. Okay, now for your hippo, he looks cute like this, but if you want to add a little bit more adorable look, you're going to grab your light Flirty Flamingo or any light pink, and we're just going to color in his tummy or her, whatever you would like, and her snout. Okay, so these blends markers just work perfectly by adding a little bit of color there. Trace the mouth and go around the nose. You could certainly add color for eyes as well, and I might even suggest you could do these little fingernails. Don't worry about the toes because they're going to be tucked and you won't see them. But it's really cute if you add these little details. All right, there's your little hippo. You're going to pop her up on dimensionals now. Just a few of them. And then she is going to get tucked in behind your wave. Okay, that's that middle space that we kind of left open. Just up to there. So there you go. Now to add these little accessories, I do suggest grabbing your glue. That will be your best friend. So we're just going to add a tiny little dot of glue by her elbow, and that will be enough to put the life preserver on. Don't need it attached everywhere, but little bit right there and let it dry. And then a little dot on the right side of her mouth. That will give you a little bit of glue for the snorkel. Ooh. Come back, little snorkel. There we go. And just put that little circle attached. The other stuff kind of hangs off the side. And then these little goggles, we're going to just put tiny dots of glue on them. If you had our adhesive sheets, you could of course turn these into a sticker before you did this, but I didn't get there for this one, so that's okay. I'm using glue. And that goes on her face. I wouldn't turn the life preserver or the snorkel into stickers because so much of them are not attached and you don't want them sticking to the background of your card or collecting dust. So there we go. There's our cute little hippo just hanging out in her tropical paradise. So I hope you guys had fun with this video. I really enjoyed the playfulness of the hippo set, and I just think she's kind of a fun way to bring a smile to someone's face. So if you don't own the hippos, you could of course do this background look and technique with something else that you own. But I do hope that you consider checking them out and seeing what you can get for free. Just an FYI, our celebration promotion is on to the end of August, but supplies are limited. So when things run out, they're gone. We've already run out of a set of cards and envelopes that were in there, and we just unfortunately don't know when other things are gonna go. So if there's something you know you want, rather than waiting on placing an order, just grab them so that you're not heartbroken. But if you miss out, do contact me because sometimes I have extras of something and I can trade you out for something else. So I will talk to you guys next week. I hope you enjoy your week and the wonderful long weekend for us in Canada. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.